Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. Here we are, Week 10 Fantasy Football, and you better believe it's going to be an absolute banger when we talk about Week 10 running backs that we're going to start and sit. However, before we get into Week 10, let's take a look at Week 9 and see how we did here at the running back position. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the running back position turned out there in Week 9 overall. We had a total of 57 running backs we discussed last week, which he gave a start or sit designation to. Out of those 57, 42 of them were correct for an accuracy percentage of 74%. You can see here on the screen some of our bigger hits and misses from just last week, and we're going to be discussing these guys once again here in this episode. However, before we do, I have a question for you. It's a simple question. It's a yes/no question. Do you like money? I'm talking cold hard cash. Hit the like button if you like yourself some money, because we're giving away $500 cash here in the month of November. How do you get entered into that giveaway? It's super simple. Head over to prizepicks.com or download the app. Create a new account. Use the referral code HEADLINERS. When you make your initial deposit of a minimum of $20, which we will match all the way up to $100, you're entered into this giveaway. I'll pick a random winner at the end of the month to just send you $500 cash, so you have a little bit of extra spending money here for the holiday season. Looking forward to doing that, but now is the time where we head into Week 10, every player, every matchup, every game, every week, and we're kicking it off with Thursday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens and Miami Dolphins. Now, I don't want to be that guy that sits back and kind of wishes injury upon anyone, right? I don't want to see anybody out there hurt. If I'm being honest, the injury to Latavius Murray just is kind of clearing things up a little bit in the Baltimore backfield, right? At least we kind of know that Devontae Freeman's going to be the guy on a weekly basis as of right now. Does Latavius Murray return this week? Well, he hasn't practiced at the time of this recording, and on a short week, it's not looking so great, right? So we have another week where we're looking at Devontae Freeman being that guy. Well, at least partially that guy. We know Le'Veon Bell's going to be involved as well. He just had a season high in touches with 11, but Devontae Freeman himself had a season high in touches just last week with 15 and played in 58% of the snaps. He now has touchdowns in 3 straight games, but what Lamar is doing right now is dominating, not only just through the air, but dude is running all over the field as well. You know, at times he's going to vulture some touchdowns, and so is Le'Veon Bell, but Devontae Freeman remains the safest bet in this backfield at this given point in a decent matchup, right? I mean, he's going up against the Miami Dolphins, who allowed right around 21 fantasy points per game, 7th most in the NFL. So I'm going to start Devontae Freeman, but I'm also going to head over to Prize Picks and smash the over, because right now it's only set at 39.5 rushing yards, smashing the over there. Now, for Miami, do you ever just catch yourself looking at your team, looking at a roster, looking at a player on your team, and just shaking your head in disgust, and then you just close your eyes and go, because they had a great opportunity and they wasted it. I mean, that's exactly what happened to Myles Gaskin this past weekend, right? He went up against the Houston Texans and he finally got some volume. He got touches. It's what we've wanted from Myles Gaskin. He got 26 of them total. But what does he do? He takes 20 of those carries for 34 yards, 1.7 yards per carry. WTF, Myles Gaskin. We finally get you some touches and you do jack squat against the Houston Texans with them. I mean, at least he caught all 6 of his targets and he scored a touchdown to kind of save your fantasy day if you happen to throw him into your lineup. But now he gets Baltimore and they only allow 1 point less per game than the likes of the Houston Texans. They're hovering right around 20 fantasy points per game themselves. Now, it also helps with no Devontae Parker or Will Fuller, because they're going to have to rely a little bit more on the pass-catching backs. Now, just last week, he played 72% of the snaps. Do I love this start? I don't love it, because we still don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. Is it going to be Tua? Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett? I really have no idea as of right now, but what I do know is at least he's getting the volume. He's getting some pass-catching work. He's going to be a start, but he's not going to be super high in the rankings here this week. Which, just like every other week, that means this is the time where we're going to hip thrust it over to Sunday football, and we're talking about the Atlanta Falcons and Dallas Cowboys. And basically what happened last week is Denver just open hand smacked the Cowboys in the face, like total disrespectful smack, like figuratively, of course, but it was bad, right? I mean, Denver came out and they looked pretty dang good. they really weren't able to get Zeke going in Dallas, right? Only 13 total touches. He was banged up at times in that game, missed a few series, came back in. Pollard's touches have been down now over the 4th straight week. He only saw 5 touches in week 9. Now, Atlanta, not a bad matchup. They allow right around 19 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and Zeke has done well against Atlanta in the past, averaging right around 22 carries and 105 yards and a touchdown per game. Now, obviously, there's no way you can sit Ezekiel Elliott on a weekly basis, but I'm not going to risk it this week with Tony Pollard. Like I said, his usage is just absolutely tanking and doesn't give me that safe floor, that potential on a weekly basis, kind of like we see with like a Nyheim Hines in Indianapolis, right? Dude hasn't done nothing, he'll explode. It's exactly what's going to happen with Tony Pollard. He's going to have a big game at some point, but it's going to be surrounded by a bunch of mediocre and lackluster games, so not somebody you can trust. He's going to be a sit. For Atlanta, it's Cordero Patterson or bust. Because of the pass work, though, because on the ground, he's not looking too great. He's only averaged over 4 yards per carry one time over his last 4 games. He hasn't had less than 5 targets in a game, though, since week 1. He's already over 700 total yards and 7 touchdowns and currently running back 7 overall. Now, Dallas, they allow right around 19 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and they were just carved up by the running backs of the Denver Broncos. Now, Mike Davis, he hasn't had 10 fantasy points in a game since week 5. He's just too risky of an option right now. He's not finding any room on the ground to run. He's not being involved in the pass catching game because that's going to Cordero Patterson. Now they're using the likes of Olamide Zaccheaus, I think is how you pronounce it. You also got Russell Gage in there, Tajay Sharp, other options. Plus we know about Cordero Patterson. So Mike Davis, kind of an afterthought in Atlanta, not somebody who I'm going to start here anytime soon. He's remaining in the sit column, and carry on Cordero. Now we head over to Tennessee, though, for the Titans and the Saints. And when you look at the Tennessee Titans running game with no Derrick Henry, it's kind of like a bag of crappy Halloween candy, right? You're excited to see it. You run home because your bag is heavy, right? You went through the whole neighborhood. You got a ton of candy. Your bag is feeling good, if you know what I mean. And then you get home, you open up that bad boy and it's full of like Fiber One brownies. And you're like, the hell is all this? And then you're severely disappointed. That's kind of like the Tennessee Titans running game right now because it's just not sexy without Derrick Henry. In fact, they're averaging like 2.5 yards per carry there between Adrian Peterson and Jeremy McNichols. But we kind of warned people of that last week, difficult matchup against the Rams. It's not much better here this week, going up against the New Orleans Saints, who allow only 14.5 fantasy points per game, 4th fewest in the NFL. Now, did we see a huge bump go the way of McNichols after Derrick Henry? No, not really. Not in the passing game. Anyway, he didn't increase at all. On the ground, sure, he saw a season-high 7 carries. Are we super pumped about 7 carries? Not really, especially since we know going forward, he's going to continue to split time with Adrian Peterson. This is going to be a backfield that's very touchdown dependent. If they don't score that touchdown, they're probably not going to produce over 10 fantasy points for you every single week. And like I said, this week, I don't know if I can bank on touchdowns because going up against New Orleans, they haven't allowed a rushing touchdown to a running back since week 5. Now, Adrian Peterson at times is going to have a good game. It will not surprise me if in the near future he goes out and gets 60, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns and really helps you to a victory one week. The problem is the floor is okay, but the ceiling is just not that high every single week. It's going to be a little bit more of a fluke, right? He's going to be a start for me here this week is Adrian Peterson, but he's not going to be super high in the rankings. As for Jeremy McNichols, going to continue to pass until we can see more work on a weekly basis. For New Orleans, let's keep Trevor Siemian under center because as of right now, Alvin Kamara is running back 5 overall. And you know he's going to be a start weekly, but there's rumors coming out that they're looking at other running backs because of a potential Alvin Kamara injury. Really nothing to go on here. Haven't really heard much at the time of this recording. I don't know if we should be worried or not. It's kind of just a random reporting and really have nothing to back it up as of right now. It's going to be something we pay close attention to. And as we get more information, we'll update you during the injury episode, end of the week, if we hear anything. Now, we know Mark Ingram, he's also going to be involved, taking some of that groundwork away from Alvin Kamara. But it's easier to throw on Tennessee, right? They allow right on 17 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Now, Ingram, there's going to be a big game coming similar to Adrian Peterson. Expect something big at some point with Mark Ingram as well. That ceiling is absolutely huge in this offense, but he's still too risky. How much of a volume bump does he get if Kamara is limited? That's what we're really paying close attention to because he did see 15 touches just last week, which makes him flex-worthy in some leagues. Now, this offense, they just don't score enough touchdowns for me to want to start both of these guys here this week. So I'm going to sit Mark Ingram, start Alvin Kamara, but we're paying close attention to that report to see if there's actually something wrong with Alvin Kamara. Now we head over to Indianapolis for the Colts and the Jags. And have you been in public lately and seen anybody walk with like their chest all puffed out, walking like they don't stink? You know what I mean? If you do, if you've seen somebody like that, it's because they're a Jonathan Taylor owner, basically. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, that's probably what's happening right now because that guy is absolutely balling out. 6 straight games now with at least 100 total yards and has at least 1 touchdown in each one of those games as well. All of 2020, get this, all of last season, in the 2020 season, Jonathan Taylor had 1,468 total yards and 12 touchdowns. Through the first 9 games this year, he's got 1,114 total yards and 9 touchdowns, currently running back 2 overall, and he's going to pass Derrick Henry more than likely this coming up week. Now, the Jacksonville defense, they've been playing a little bit better, but they still allow 17 fantasy points per game. No question you're going to start Jonathan Taylor every single week, but what about Nyheim Hines? He only had 10 touches last week. I know he had a great game, but the touches, the volume wasn't crazy. It was really boosted by a 34-yard touchdown, which really helped his numbers look a lot better than they actually were. Can we count on a 34-yard touchdown rush every single week from Nyheim Hines? I don't think you can, and that's why he's going to remain a sit. For Jacksonville, sounds like we're going to get James Robinson back, at least according to Urban Meyer, that is, which is good, right? Because Carlos Hyde, dude just ain't cutting it, right? Carlos Hyde is not somebody we want to start in fantasy football, but this is no smash start for J-Rob as well. Indianapolis defense is pretty good. They allow only 14 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That's 3rd fewest in the NFL. Now, prior to the injury, J-Rob had 4 straight games with at least 19 touches. Does he see that type of volume coming off of this bruised heel? Maybe. Am I counting on it? Wouldn't surprise me if we see a slight decrease and a little bit more of a split with Carlos Hyde, but he's also had 5 touchdowns over that same 4-game span. So we know he can find the end zone. Jacksonville needs playmakers desperately. They're really reliant right now on Jamal Agnew. Come on. J-Rob is the best option in this offense as of right now to help take some of that pressure off of Trevor Lawrence, who's banged up himself with a sprained ankle. So he's definitely somebody who could be involved here. Difficult matchup, going to be a start, not super high in the rankings. Over to New England now for the Patriots and the Browns. And when I saw this matchup, there's only 2 words that came to mind. Oh, shit. And I say that because both Nick Chubb and Demetric Felton were placed on COVID IR. Now, silver lining, both are vaccinated. So as long as they can get those 2 negative tests, they should be able to play here this week. And they're not ruled out as of yet, but this is definitely something we need to pay close attention to. I'm not really worried about Demetric Felton from a fantasy perspective, but dang it, I need my Chubby right now in my fantasy football lineup. So let's hope for the best here. Hopefully we get Nick Chubb back in time for this week's game. He's averaging 16.7 fantasy points per game, 7th highest among all running backs in the NFL. And the Patriots right now are allowing right around 17 fantasy points per game. If Nick Chubb plays, he starts. If he does not play, then we're looking at D'Ernest Johnson once again, who could be in line for a huge workload, especially with no Demetric Felton. Definitely something we're paying close attention to. Like I said, to reiterate, if Chubb plays, Chubb starts and no one else. If Chubb sits, D'Ernest Johnson starts and no one else. And we really hope to get that big boom week once again from D'Ernest Johnson. Now for New England, Damian Harris out there seeing more TDs than most men in America on a weekly basis. I mean, he's got 5 straight weeks now leading this backfield in New England with at least 1 touchdown. He wasn't efficient in week 9, but we love to see the volume. Plus, he was a little bit banged up there last week. How does that affect him here in week 10? Another guy we're watching the injury reports on, but the way he's been playing, you can't afford not to start him if he's healthy. So Damian Harris going to be a start. For Ramondre Stevenson, he's starting to look good, right? He runs hard, and I love the way they utilize him here in this offense. He had a season-high 12 touches just this past week. Cleveland's difficult to run on, though. They allow right around 16 fantasy points per game, and in my opinion, right now, still feel more confident and safer starting Damian Harris going into Week 10. Now, we're going to watch and monitor that injury. If for some reason he does not play or he's limited, that's going to boost up Ramondre Stevenson, put him a little bit higher up the rankings, because as of right now, Damian Harris also the guy still getting those goal line opportunities, and that's where he's scoring all these touchdowns. So we're paying close attention to it, but as of right now, Damian Harris, the guy we're starting in New England. Over the Jets and the Bills now, when we all looked at this schedule before the season started, we saw this group of games for Buffalo, and we kind of started to drool a little bit because we saw the Titans, the Dolphins, the Jags, the Jets, and we're like, yes, that's where we're going to absolutely dominate all facets of the game, are the Buffalo Bills. They've lost 2 out of the first 3 games there, and they just look out of sync, right? Just something doesn't look right. They're playing down to the level of their opponents, but they're going to figure it out. They're too good of a football team to not figure it out. But one thing that is not surprising here in Buffalo is that Zach Moss is potentially hurt again and not going to play. Definitely something we're paying attention to, but Zach Moss isn't somebody who we're looking forward to starting on a weekly basis. But this means more Devin Singletary, who just saw a season high in targets last week with 8. The problem is they're not getting a whole lot of scoring opportunities in this backfield. If they get close to the goal line, Josh Allen's just stealing it and taking it for himself anyway. But now going against the Jets, they allow 30 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That is the most in the NFL. If Zach Moss isn't playing and Devin Singletary is the guy getting that pass catching work, his floor is a little bit safer. He's going to be a start, but another one of these guys is going to be lower down the rankings for the Jets. Are they better without Zach Wilson? Better question. Is Zach Wilson the third best quarterback on his own team right now? It's kind of a legit question, right? Because they're actually playing better here over the past few weeks, but both Michael Carter and Ty Johnson, they're involved in the pass-catching game. Michael Carter a little bit more on the ground, getting the bulk of the volume there. Carter still seeing those higher snap percentages as well. But we saw a huge drop in pass work with Josh Johnson under center going the way of Michael Carter than we saw with Mike White. Good news here. Mike White should be back and playing quarterback for the Jets here this week, which means shorter passing game and more involvement to Michael Carter. Now, just 2 weeks ago, Michael Carter saw 14 targets from Mike White there in week 8. He's going to be a start for me here this week. It's a difficult matchup. Not somebody who I'm going to rank super high, but I do think he has the safer floor this week and potentially finds the end zone against a Bills team who's kind of playing down to their opponent's level as of right now. Which takes us now to Pittsburgh and Detroit, my Manscaped matchup of the week. And just a quick reminder, as soon as this show is over, head over to manscaped.com right now and get yourself something for the holidays. They got all kinds of new products over there, body wash, shampoo. I mean, it's not just ball trimmers, y'all. They have all kinds of things for your travel bag and for the house. So make sure you check them out. Use that promo code Headliners at checkout, though, so you can get yourself 20% off and free shipping. But back to this game, a couple of easy ones to kind of figure out, right? Najee Harris and DeAndre Swift, both weekly starts here in fantasy football. Najee scores touchdowns, right? He has them in 6 of his last 7 games played. He's had at least 20 touches in 6 straight games. He's involved in the passing game, and Detroit allows 24 fantasy points per game, which is 3rd most in the NFL. He's definitely going to be a start for DeAndre Swift. He's coming off the bye week. He should be healthy, and prior to the bye week, he had 4 straight games with at least 17 touches and touchdowns in 3 of his last 4, plus 5 targets in every game so far this season. Detroit, they're always going to be losing, right? And I expect them to be losing once again here this week. But when they're losing, they're throwing, and that helps DeAndre Swift, which makes him a start. Over to Washington now, though, for the football team and the Bucs, and 2 teams that should be pretty rested, right, coming off of their bye week. But for Tampa Bay, it's really all about regular season Lenny, right? Because the usage of Ronald Jones or Gio Bernard just isn't high enough to warrant starting them right now in fantasy football. Leonard Fournette currently running back 15 overall in half PPR scoring, averaging right around 13 fantasy points per game. And he's really relied upon in Tampa Bay when they have a lead. Good thing about that is Tampa Bay tends to have a lead a lot. Now, Leonard Fournette has had at least 17 touches in 3 of his last 5 games, 4 touchdowns over his last 4 games, and Washington allows right around 19 fantasy points per game. We're going to start ourselves some regular season Lenny. For the Washington football team, Antonio Gibson. Is he healthier? How is he feeling? We're waiting to see some practice reports to see how he progresses here after the bye week, because this matchup is not ideal going up against Tampa Bay, who allows only 16 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. We know J.D. McKissic going to be involved in this backfield. It is easier to throw on Tampa Bay than it is to run on Tampa Bay, and I expect Washington to be trailing and having to throw the ball here this week. Now, I expect to see more Antonio Gibson at some point in this season until we get more word, right? More information based off of this injury and how he is after the bye week. I understand that right now is not the easiest time to start Antonio Gibson, especially with the involvement of J.D. McKissic in the backfield, who's getting the passing work in a game in which they're probably going to be trailing. Antonio Gibson hasn't scored over 6.5 fantasy points in 3 straight games. I get it. Trust me. This, in my opinion, all comes down to options, right? Would I start Jamal Williams or Antonio Gibson? I'm going Antonio Gibson. Would I start Nyheim Hines or Antonio Gibson? I'm going Antonio Gibson, right? There's a cutoff at some point in which you take that gamble with Antonio Gibson. So it really relies or depends on what options you have on your roster. Right now, with J.D. McKissic, somebody who's gotten 24 targets over his last 3 games combined, in a game in which they're trailing, I feel safer starting J.D. McKissic here this week than I do Antonio Gibson. But when the rankings come out, you'll kind of see where he slots. At one point, I'm really willing to take that risk and just hope that he comes out healthy and finds the end zone. Another tough backfield here to try to figure out Washington, and it may not get easier for the coming weeks. But now we go all the way over to Arizona for the Cardinals and Carolina Panthers, and guess what? Christian McCaffrey played last week, and he got 18 touches, and he didn't get hurt in the process. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, CMC. I mean, in fact, he actually had over 100 total yards. No touchdowns, though, which kind of disappointed some of us. But hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? This is not an easy matchup for him, though. Going up against the Arizona Cardinals, they only allow 14 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That's second fewest, but it's Christian McCaffrey. If he's healthy, you don't ever sit him. For Arizona, we do have an injury to worry about, and it's Chase Edmonds, who's going to miss some time here in this offense. But what does that mean? It means more James Conner, who's absolutely killing it, and now it means we see a lot more Eno Benjamin. Have you heard of the name Eno Benjamin? Because he came in last week and started to make a name for himself in this offense. But we've mentioned this for years. In the Kingsbury offense, it doesn't really matter who's in the backfield. They're going to produce. It's the way that the offense is spread out. It gives more opportunities for these pass-catching type of backs to go out there and produce. Now, is Eno Benjamin going to be the guy that goes out there and is like Austin Eckler? No, in fact, he didn't get any targets last week. They all went the way of James Conner, who, like I mentioned, is absolutely killing it right now. But Eno Benjamin is a Kingsbury guy. He was a Kingsbury draft pick, and he's going to get an opportunity here the next couple weeks. But James Conner's still going to be the lead guy. He has 4 2-touchdown games so far this season, this James Conner. 4 games in which he's rushed for 2 touchdowns. The guy is absolutely just dominating in fantasy football, and he's now tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns with Derrick Henry. He's definitely going to be a start for me here this week. Eno, he's a little bit more of a deep league option. He's going to be a sit for now. Carolina allows right around 17 fantasy points per game, so they're decent against the run, and I'm not going to try to risk it and get too cute here in week 10 to start Eno Benjamin, but he's definitely a name to pay attention to, and if they want to commit to him, and Edmonds is out for an extended period of time, he could be somebody we look at down the stretch here this season. Out to LA now for the Chargers and the Vikings in 2 pretty simple starts, right? A couple no-brainers with Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler. 2 teams that allow over 20 fantasy points per game to running backs. Both dominate their backfields and touches. Both get passing work. Both score touchdowns. Both are easy starts weekly, right? Yes, 100%. However, there's news coming out about some potential issues with Dalvin Cook, and I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to act like I can see the future here. I don't know what is the truth and what is not the truth, and how it may affect him going forward. So as of right now, at the time of this recording, Dalvin Cook is active and playing this week, and this is how I'm going to handle it going forward. It's pretty much a no-brainer, right? If anything were to happen to Dalvin Cook in the future, we know Alexander Mattison is plug and play. But for this week, as of right now, with Dalvin Cook active, I'm actually going to head over to Prize Picks and smash the over, because it's currently set at 85.5 rushing yards. That's definitely a number I can see him outproducing here this week. Like I said, we're going to follow this situation pretty close, but I'm not going to sit here and speculate and act like I know exactly what happened and feed a bunch of garbage to you just so you can think that you know what's going on. I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going on right now. It's just something that we're going to have to pay attention to and watch here in the coming weeks. Now we go over to Denver for the Broncos and the Eagles, and I guess we've like Marty McFly'd it and gone back to 2018, which I guess if you think about it, isn't entirely a bad thing given what we had to deal with the last year and a half here. 2018 doesn't sound half bad, right? But I say that because Jordan Howard is a thing once again, back in the backfield for the Philadelphia Eagles, leading this backfield in touches now. Back-to-back weeks, he's also found the end zone, not really involved in the passing game, which we know has never really been his thing, but he's finding the end zone enough for us to want to kind of start him in fantasy football. In a matchup going up against the Denver Broncos, who allow right around 18 fantasy points per game, this is still a very messy backfield where I really don't want to have to rely on any of these guys, but as of right now, Jordan Howard is getting the nod. We're starting to see the snaps drop for Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, which is, it's just so hard to figure out and really understand, right? I mean, we didn't really know what was going on with Gainwell and Miles Sanders, and then all of a sudden Miles Sanders goes down, and Gainwell's, hit or miss. Scott's a thing for like a week. And then all of a sudden, Jordan Howard is the savior. It's super crazy in Philadelphia, and it's hard to rely on any of these guys. But with all things considered, this week, given the opportunities they've seen over the past few weeks, Jordan Howard has that touchdown upside and will be the guy that I roll the dice on in week 10. For Denver, they know how to use a committee of running backs, right? Both Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams remain solid weekly flex plays for your roster. I don't care the format. These guys are getting it done. Melvin, he's finding the end zone. And Javonte Williams he looks like a great running back. Tell me that you don't somewhat see a Nick Chubb-esque running back when you watch Javonte Williams tape. The guy is making defenders miss. He's breaking tackles. He's rushing for 100 yards a game just this past week. And Philadelphia allows over 20 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Both these guys have very safe floors. They have pretty high ceilings. They both have that touchdown upside, and they're both going to remain starts. Now we go over to Green Bay, though, for the Packers and the Seahawks, and it sounds like there's a chance that Chris Carson comes back to practice this week, but does he play? I'm not too optimistic about that just yet, and even if he does, he's going to be limited and ease back into the workload. They're not just going to throw him back out there to get 30 touches here this week, especially going up against Green Bay, who allows right around 17.5 fantasy points per game, but they're also getting Russell Wilson back, it sounds like, and we know when Russ is out there, he wants to cook and throw the ball down the field, and they may have to keep pace with Green Bay here this week. But all these running backs combined are really going to eat into each other's production. You still have Alex Collins in the mix and Rashad Penny, and then if Carson comes back, it's just a huge mess. And honestly, until we see more clarity here, maybe we get it by the weekend. Maybe there's, maybe they rule out Chris Carson. Maybe he's not a game time decision. Maybe we get more clarity heading into the weekend. That's something we can talk about during the live show. But as of right now, they're all being listed as a sit. For Green Bay, I think Aaron, as in Aaron Rodgers, wants to kind of restart the suck it tour, right? The discount double suck it tour. Now, Rodgers kind of tends to go off when he's getting some hate in the media. And honestly, he's received some hate in the media here over the past few days. Whether it's warranted or not, that's not what we're discussing. But usually when things like that happen, he comes out and kind of tends to put on a show. And that's going to benefit the running game as a whole. We know Seattle, they allow some points to running backs, 23 fantasy points per game to be exact, fourth most in the NFL. And you're going to start Aaron Jones every single week. But what about A.J. Dillon, who's kind of hovering right around that 40% snap mark on a weekly basis? He's also averaging over 5 yards per carry over his last 2 games combined. He tied a season high in targets with 4 in week 9. He's just not getting the scoring opportunities, right? He's not getting those goal line touches. They're kind of still going the way of Aaron Jones when they do get it. So I'm going to stick with Aaron Jones here this week and continue to sit A.J. Dillon until he can get a little bit more of that goal line work. Now we go to Sunday Night Football, Las Vegas Raiders, Kansas City Chiefs, and be honest with me, how many of you out there would have thought that I was absolutely crazy had I come to you before the season and said, hey, listen, by the time we get to week 10, Kansas City is going to be tied for the most losses in the division? You would have thought that I was absolutely nuts and had totally lost it. You probably unsubscribe and go watch something else. But look where we are. And here we are right now, and Kansas City still struggling. Darrell Williams is about the safest option in this entire offense at this point, which is crazy to think about. He's had at least 19 plus touches, though, now in back-to-back games. He's getting the scoring opportunities. They're just not what they used to be a few weeks ago. His ceiling is a lot lower. However, his floor remains pretty safe because he's getting the bulk of the work in this backfield. He's not losing it to anybody. Still no CEH back yet. Las Vegas allows right around 18 fantasy points per game. So I'm going to start Darrell Williams for Las Vegas. Both Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, they remain safe floor plays on a weekly basis. Kenyon Drake has actually looked really good all around, not only on the ground, but through the air as well. Jacobs getting more touches on the ground, but he was a little bit banged up once again in week 9. Doesn't sound like he's going to miss any time, came back into that game. But this offense also just added Deshaun Jackson. Does that hurt the backfield at all? Potentially, maybe even Kenyon Drake some if he sees a few less targets there in the passing game. This could definitely be a move, though, that is maybe a week or two away. I don't expect Deshaun Jackson to just go out there and light it up his first week in Las Vegas. He's not what he used to be, right? He's definitely needed in this offense and can be utilized. I don't know if he just all of a sudden comes in and dominates this offense, though, in his first active week. The Kansas City Chiefs allow right around 18 fantasy points per game, but as for Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs, both remain a start. So we rounded out with Monday Night Football, Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco 49ers, the battle of 2 California teams, and had a slight scare with Darrell Henderson in week 9, right? Left the game with an ankle injury. We all got a little bit worried, kind of puckered up a little bit, but he returned and looked pretty good after his injury. Sony Michel got the touchdown, so that kind of led to the down week overall for Darrell Henderson, but he's still number 1 in this backfield, and he's going to continue to be number 1 in this backfield. Sony Michel's 2.8 yards per carry isn't going to take away Darrell Henderson's usage. Now, San Francisco allows right around 16 fantasy points per game. But look what Arizona just did against this defense. We're absolutely going to start Darrell Henderson. For San Francisco, I'm not loving it. Not loving it at all, right? So many people last week were so excited about Jeff Wilson Jr., and then he didn't even play. But do we see him this week? Does he play this week? It's more likely to see him suit up here this week, Monday Night Football. But Elijah Mitchell is still the guy getting the bulk of the touches in this backfield, but he's not 100% healthy either. In a matchup now going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who will have added Von Miller to that defense, it only makes things more difficult going up against the Rams. Now, a potential bigger split here between Wilson and Elijah Mitchell in a tough matchup. I hate to do it, but I'm not overly interested in anybody in this backfield here this week until we can kind of see how it plays out. Now, this will kind of be a good litmus test. Litmus, like the biggest word I've used today. Anyway, how do they respond here in a difficult matchup? If they continue to ride the hot hand of Elijah Mitchell, I think that we can say moving forward, it's his job to lose. If Jeff Wilson Jr. comes in there and just, gets a 50-50 split or even out touches Elijah Mitchell, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for us to figure out going forward. We'll watch it this week in a difficult matchup in which we kind of expect lower numbers anyway, and then we can react and respond to how we should handle this going forward in week 11. But for this week, they're all sits. All right, those are my starts and sits for the running back position here, week 10 fantasy football. Hopefully I was able to help shed a little bit of light on some situations there on your fantasy football roster. But just a reminder, get in on that $500 giveaway. Head over to prizepicks.com, download that app, get signed up, use the code headliners, make that initial deposit. We'll match up to $100, and then you're entered into that $500 drawing end of the month. Really looking forward to giving that away to somebody here for the holiday season. But hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, a great week. Looking forward to another great week 10 here this week, and we will talk to you later.